Okay. All right. Ooh, let me get the lights. I'm gonna make the mood a little bit cozier. All right. There we go. All right, people. Sorry for the wait. Okay. Thank you so much, Rami, for following. You're a sweetheart. All right. So we are beginning today with a couple of questions. Questions relating to nothing in particular. These questions usually form as just one word to begin with. Our first word is pause. Okay, so I guess we'll tackle this a little bit. So, I have considered the recreational use of marijuana a few times in my life. Mostly when things were at their most dire, during my dark age, I guess you could call it. During this time, I was very upset most commonly during the day and equally so at night. I would be so distraught sometimes that I would be unable to function at school, function with my friends, or have any real substance of character beyond the lust and need of the moment at hand. Coming from the left, let's see. Why would that be? Why would that be? Oh, it's true, it's only coming in from the left. Let's see if we can fix that. Okay, so it does favor the left. I don't know why. Interesting. Oh, I see. I'm just talking in your left ear. Let's see. Here's some typing ASMR for you. There we go. We're looking at
Hey,
restoring
welcome.
audio mixer. Okay. Oh my gosh, I just keep sneezing for some reason. Ugh. Alright, well, I'm on the case right now as to figuring out why I'm just speaking in your left ear. So just give me a moment to figure this out, and I'll do my best to get it sent properly. Oh, there we go. That should do it. At least that's your good ear. Well, it's a good sense of humor you have, at least. Grateful. Oh, good. Alright, now that we've sort of gotten back on track. So, I was most tempted recently to venture into the recreational use of drugs when I was going through a period in which I did not have a dependable antipsychotic to rely on. And people that go through things like trauma and other sorts of mental problems, they oftentimes do. Oh, excuse me a moment. I have never had allergies in my entire life, but I think I'm developing some. Because I just keep sneezing. Oh man. Ugh. Alright, gonna wipe my eyes off. And keep going. But the use of things like pot and like edibles, I think that just about everybody can recommend that they have their uses, right? That they can be good for a lot of things and that they can help with a lot of ailments. But also on top of that, it's important to remember that when you imbibe in any kind of recreational or sports or any kind of activity, you have to do so knowing that it could change you, right? And in my case, I do fear being changed by something like that. Though I suppose it's natural. It's natural to fear something new like that. I mean, I often worry that I won't ever be able to relax in all of my years alive. And one thing that would really help is if I tried something like pot, to have an edible, and smoking's not really for me, mind you, but something simple like that. It is something I consider from time to time. You know, who doesn't want to be able to just relax for a few hours and not think about the things that bother and trouble them? I certainly consider it. On top of all of that, it's important to remember that this is the sort of thing that shouldn't be taken lightly, and everyone has a first time for everything. Alongside that, people should be wary of in what situation they put themselves in for their first time for any event. This one specifically, and others that are similar to it. Let's go on to our next question. Betray. Oh, the times in my life I've been betrayed. There was a moment in my life of, I guess, trust with someone who didn't deserve it, I suppose. I put my trust in them, and you know, they had failed me. And you know, people are fallible, you know, they make mistakes. It's oftentimes we find that it happens most frequently in those around us that are closest to us. And it's because we see them so purely and so cleanly, and when we see their mistakes, they're that much more apparent to us. That was the case. Its effects will vary, it's very true. In this particular case, the person who was interested in partaking in my activities, they were a friend of mine at some point, but they had overstayed their welcome in a huge way, and it led to them no longer being in my life, and they attempted to usurp me of a very critical role in a very critical time of my life, and they partially succeeded. Because of that, I could never really go back to being friends with them, even after they attempted to reach out to me with their, what I must admit was a token effort on their part. But after I had been sort of pushed in this way, the friendship never recovered, you know, but that's very common. People end up in these situations where they can't go back to the way things were. It happens with all kinds of relationships, not just friendships, but we'd become nemesis for just a little while, you know, just for about like 5 minutes maybe. But it was not a healthy dynamic. And honestly, if I have to recommend anything to the people out there who have been betrayed, or even those who have betrayed somebody, is just forgive everybody in the situation, yourself, them. Just be forgiving, be benevolent and merciful, because it's the hate that we keep with us that ties us down to the feelings that we have, negative. They keep us in the past, keep us from moving forward. the best advice I can give you is forgive, and eventually, for the most part, forget. Only remember the lesson it taught you. Remember the lesson it taught you, but don't remember the pain that brings you back to that moment. Don't remember being tied down to it, being owned by it. Remember what you learned, and remember that it was important to you. And keep that with you. For me, it's always been difficult to stop from lingering on the past, but I suppose I'm a very sentimental person. Can't be helped. Now, let's move on to our next question. Our next word. Breakdown. Sure. So, there have been many times in my life where I've sort of reached a threshold, if you could call it that. A threshold where I was sort of no longer capable of functioning very well. And this happens to a lot of different people. You reach a place and you find yourself not able to move forward very effectively. And one of the most important things that I've been through, always remember what they said and did and how they made you feel. Because there's a good chance they will do it again. And when they do, you should hopefully be better able to deal with it. I do agree with you, Rami. I do agree with you. The most important breakdown that's ever happened in my life was the moment that I realized I was aging. As funny as that may sound. It was a moment on my way to my previous psychiatrist when I realized that I was aging. I was seeing for the first time in my life that I had turned from 24 to 25. Well, let's see if we can remove a little bit of that seawater and add in something fresh. How about that? Coffee. Not too bad. When you have a big breakdown, though, there are different ways that people respond to their breakdowns. Like some people get angry, which luckily that's never been an issue I've had. Some people get very sad. That's sort of where I was for a while. And some people just become destructive towards themselves. That's what I was doing. I was very inwardly destructive. So much so that I had to spend some time being taken care of. But it was an important time for me. Mostly because when we are in these moments in our life where we have to make a decision between being safe and being radical, sometimes it can feel like the radicality is the right choice just by virtue of it seeming so visceral and extreme. But extremes can be very dangerous. And it's important for us to remember that safety is always more important than sensation. And that's easy to forget when you get things like YOLO and stuff like that, where you want to jump off of a cliff and into a sea or an ocean or a body of water. But never forget that your safety always comes first, because if your sentience or sapience is no longer existing on this planet, then nobody can know what kind of sensation that you had. A person who is no longer with us cannot share their experiences. So just be wary, always try to stay a little safer than you think you are already being. But that doesn't mean don't have fun, of course. On to the next question. So, Rami, what I can tell you is that whatever way that you have your breakdowns, that is your way. And you should feel completely comfortable in saying, this is what happens to me. It's not good or bad. It is just the way you cope with things. And I hope that you are able to tell yourself that I am going to be fine, regardless of the way I handle this. Because that is the reality, is that you will be okay. Feed, sure. Well, it is possible that we could hurt the people around us just by being who we are. That is the nature of these situations, is oftentimes we find ourselves hurtling towards this awfulness that infects the rest of our reality. But what we have to remember is that that's not us, right? That's the alternate lizard brain version of us. And that it doesn't prove whether we're good or bad, or whether we are capable of being happy or sad or angry. We're still who we are, regardless of how we respond to things. And maybe that scare, maybe it's there for a reason, but just know that you have to accept the way you feel about things. You have to accept that that's how you respond. And the best thing you can do is tell those around you who do care that you have these feelings. And before you know it, you'll start to feel just a little bit better. But that's just what I think. Here's one. Devote. Oftentimes we find ourselves devoting things and time and place and energy. We devote all sorts of things to one cause, to one just effort that we put our whole soul into. And sometimes our efforts are just so outrageous and so crazy and volatile, and we can barely control them, but it's still a beautiful thing, when you can devote yourself to one thing, to one problem, one solution. Art. Devotion, to me, means art. There's many kinds of arts, though. There's the art of painting, the most obvious one, if you ask me, that everyone thinks about when you say the word art. There's the art of being a good boyfriend. The art of speaking with somebody as an equal. And there's even the art that I'm doing right now, which is voice acting, voiceover, or ASMR, whatever you like to call it. And they're all the same to me, really. But devoting oneself to a cause, to something incredible and important, strong and soulful and willful, devoting yourself to mastery, I think that is something that should be applauded. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Even if sometimes it can border on being unhealthy, it can be worth it to make something beautiful. I mean, I know that pretty well myself. I've had some obsessions with things in the past that have been unpleasant for me, but just remember that if you obsess over something, the best thing you can do is be aware that you're obsessing over something. Because awareness is the first step on the road to change. And all things change. And if you're like me, you'll become obsessed with something else in no time. Let's move on to the next question. Mug. Mug. Let's see. If I think about mug, I think about faces. You know, the faces that have been important in my life. One of the most important faces has always been my own. And I think that in our society, it's very easy to get lost and focused on the wrong thing, on the visual appeal of a person. I mean, of course you would, though, right? That's what you see. It's the gateway to the life, the livelihood. Everything that a person is can be seen in their face. But you have to know what you're looking for. You have to go in with a gentleness, with a kindness. And when you look at somebody's face, you can never assume anything. You can only look, but never judge. Because there's no sadder, maybe more unfair of an action than judging somebody just by the way they look. And I know that fairly well myself, actually. But I've always had a bit of a stigma against my own reflection. It's very common, though. You know, people do not like the way they look in the mirror. Oftentimes we find that our eyes give us away, and Rami is alluding to the fact that it's very difficult for us to hide things with our eyes because micro emotions and micro fluctuations in our face, micro expressions, they are built into us, and I don't know if even the greatest of liars are able to save themselves from micro expressions, because lying is an inherently difficult thing to do. Oh, well, thank you, Teddy. That's very kind of you to say. And welcome to the stream. Oh, hello. It's been too long. Alright, and now we're moving on to our next topic. Challenge. Oh, here's a good one. When we are challenged, now what's the first thing that we think of? Do we think about the blood that boils inside of us? You know, the unstir, the rapid heartbeat, the aspirations, the inspirations, the ambitions? Or do we think about the calculations necessary to beat your challenge, to win? Because everybody has been challenged by something in their life. And I don't believe there's one person who has ever faced a life without any challenge. If there is, then it does sound like a life that would be a bit boring, doesn't it? What kind of a life would that be? You know, challenge is the absolute nature, the necessity, the seed of growth. And we water that plant. because its fruit is worth bearing, it's worth tending to. And challenge is it's quintessential to growth. And I find myself being challenged to even do this stream, honestly. I find myself apprehensive, nervous, anxious, even reticent. I worry it's because I see the good it could do for me. I see the power it could hold over me. And who doesn't fear having a little bit more control over themselves than they would like to? I know, I certainly have that fear myself, but I can't speak for you. Just always remember, sometimes the thing you're most afraid of is the thing that might help you the most. Oh, sorry, I bumped the microphone. Well, I hope I hope that I'm at least expanding your vocabulary a little bit, if nothing else. Alright, on to our next question. Cover. There's a lot of things in my life that I've tried to smooth over and cover. Because, everybody has things they're ashamed of. Everybody has things that they think about and like, oh, why did I do that? Or you cringe, or you feel this inward, just tandem of action being drawn up to hang and quarter yourself, because you've done something so unbearable. And that's a sensation that I suffer through. Not as much now as I once did, I will say. But in the past, I have been very, very harsh on myself for making the simplest, most rudimentary, and amateur mistakes. But we always judge ourselves harsher than everybody else. At least that is what the people that I have found to be my role models have done. And I suppose it is natural to want to it is natural to want to feel justice for the things that you've done improperly, right? Like, oh, I stepped on somebody's shoes. Oh, I should, I'm a bastard or a knave, a wretch. But at the end of the day, they're just shoes, just a toe. Don't get so beat up about it. Don't get so worked up over it. And I try to smooth these things over sometimes, but the real essence of the matter, the real thing you should do is you should, as I said before, forgive yourself. Just look in the mirror and say, yeah, I stepped on that shoe. I ruined that good pair of sneakers with that tread marks that I had on the bottom of my loaves. But they can always buy a new shoe. You can always polish leather. What is done can be undone. And what is will always change. So make the good first step and let yourself know that it's okay to make these mistakes and that you will move on. Let's go to our next question. Marsh. I find marshlands to be incredibly unattractive. It is very important what Rami has just reminded us, that these examples that we have of our own mistakes can be very relevant to conversations at hand. While bringing them up can be very helpful to put yourself in a place of vulnerability, to let the other person know what's happened to you. You must never do so to try and disregard yourself as being a human being or a person who is fallible and can still be perfect in their own way. even after making such a mistake. Make sure that you never put yourself in harm's way just to make an example for someone not to do it. I don't know if it's the swamp itself or if it's just the way that swamps look to me, but I've always found them disgusting. You know, alligators and crocodiles, whatever the difference is, the beak, the snout, muzzle, whatever that's called. I've always found it to be so unpleasant. I'm glad you think so, Ella. Thank you very much. Stinky, slimy, wet stuff. Yeah, I agree. This is slimy. It's just adding wisdom to your routine is hardly an easy task, but I think it's worthwhile. So, there's a lot of, the memes of our culture tell us about swamps in different ways. I've always been partial to the feeling that swamps are very rich and abundant in whatever resource they have, but they trade that. They trade that for their musk, for their smells and their sights. And I'm sure there's beauty to be found in the mangrove trees, and there is a reflection of the leafy greens that one could get from the clear crystal waters of certain swamps. But as Rami is saying now, I do not do slimy and wet. I couldn't agree more. I've never been a fan of swamps. Swamps are just, they're humid, and they're wet, and they're full of mosquitoes. Oh, just not worth it. We're moving on from this one. Wording, very important. Something that I feel a touch of inability to say this one, but it was told to me about 5 years ago, which was about 20 years too late. What you say matters. That's especially important for me because I have a minor, I guess you could call it a learning disorder or a disability when it comes to making words appear in my mind. Oftentimes, I assume the other person in the conversation. Rami, please. I'm gonna take a drink of water after that one. I always had this fixation, I guess you could call it, this thought that I could sort of mind link with the person I was talking to. And I always used to think that they could just hear my thoughts, and I didn't have to say the whole sentence, or I didn't have to finish my words properly, or I didn't have to do anything really. You just had to say a few words and they would get the rest. I can tell you, this is not true. People cannot understand what you're thinking, or what you mean, or what your intention is, unless you tell them. This is one of the most important things you can learn in life, is how to communicate properly, the wording of the way you speak. If you cannot word things properly, it can be a huge disadvantage. And in our society, where people are judged by the wording they use for political correctness, for offense, if you use the wrong word, you can be canceled like that. So it's important for us to remember that we have to be wary of the things we say, and we have to be mindful of who we say them to. And there is always time to be offensive. There's always time to make a remark that is colorless or too colorful, mind you. That is just inappropriate or to misbehave. There's always time to misbehave. But never forget that when you misbehave, others can see it. And if you feel no shame in the way you misbehave, then that is a beautiful thing. Just make sure that you don't regret it later on. I guess that's all I have to say. Alright, let's move on to our next topic. Stadium. Oh, I have such a good one for this. So, in my time of being on this earth, I have been to a stadium a few times. Rami has just told us that it's very difficult to explain things when you can't think of the right words for it, and I agree tremendously. I agree. It takes a considerable amount of effort. You have to put forth so much energy just to say yes and no in the right way. Just two simple things. And the hardest one, the one that's even worse than that, is the maybes. Trying to say maybe is tough. It's really tough. I struggle with those, you know? But we do have to keep trying. You know, we can never fully embrace that we have accomplished mastery or any kind of grand mastery over the way to speak properly. Because we're always graduating from one plateau to another. I have been... Typing is easier for me as well, actually. Typing is more concise, I've found. More precise as well. But yeah, once you put something out there on the internet, it's out there, and you basically have to assume it's out there for good. So Ella, if I had to comment on that, there is a intense labor that is performed when we create thoughts in our mind, and the transition between that and actually speaking the thoughts, making them real, is incredibly difficult. It is one of the most complex and energy consuming things that our brain does. It's why conversations can be so tiring for some people. I'm a bit of an ambivert when it comes to conversations, so I can be very enthused by it from time to time. But it can be tiresome and tedious, and it's like my brain speaks a totally different language from my mouth. I agree with you. It can feel like you don't know where the end of this sentence is going. It can feel like you are about to say something, and then suddenly there's nothing left to say. It's very complicated, isn't it? Very complicated. Quite complicated for the 7th of November. Not so bad, though. just thinking about having made it 25 years on this planet. It's almost Christmas. Almost my 25th Christmas. It's a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. Decorations have always been something I've loved, seeing my neighbors' decorations. Yeah, it's difficult to elaborate properly. It's difficult to actually say what you mean, because if you think too fast, then you can't get everything that you intend to say out quick enough, and then it becomes a mishmash of words. A word salad, as some say. And while I love Christmas decorations, and Halloween decorations too, I don't know which I prefer. I like the color of orange and the sort of spookiness of Halloween decorations, but I find myself longing for Christmas decorations once again. Maybe it's because it's already past Halloween, but I didn't quite get my fill on Halloween either. But this is a very... It's true. There's an extravagance of both of them. If I could choose, and I spoke to this effect in our last stream, if I could choose between walking around seeing Christmas lights with a bow or seeing Halloween lights, I don't know which I would choose. If I had to, I'd probably choose Halloween. That way we can still choose to look at Christmas lights in just a few months and be ready to get back at it. It's amazing the kind of stuff you can find at dollar stores, as Rami has let us know. Dollar stores. I considered working in a dollar store once. 2020 is a crazy year, though. I'll tell you that much. Stop. Huge. Fool. No. Contradiction. This is a good one. So, the human brain is full of contradictions. Hypocrisy is abound in the mind of man. It is natural for us to both create and destroy things that we love and hate for no other reason than it just felt like the right thing to do. Contradiction is a way of life. It's humanity to, say one thing and do the other. I've been a hypocrite in my life, I have to admit. I've been hypocritic, and I remember the first time I called someone out on being a hypocrite. It was in, oh gosh, 3rd grade, and this young lady was simultaneously telling me I couldn't move the box on my desk while moving the box on hers. And she wanted the box on my desk to be in one particular place for her own liking. And this is a very common thing for 3rd graders, so I suppose it can be forgiven. But I called her a hypocrite. And she thought I was calling her fat, which she was not fat, so that was not the case. And I remember very, very clearly, the teacher told me, you have to apologize to her. And I crossed my arms, stomped on my foot, turned my head away, and I said, no, I'm not apologizing. And you know what? I was being a damn hero. You never apologize. No, I'm just kidding. I made her cry, and that's when I should have apologized. Because that's when I should have apologized, is when she started crying. Because she honestly thought I was calling her a hippo, and that was the point of contention. That was the point of problematic nature arising. But before then, I was right. She was being a hypocrite. But I hurt her feelings in the process. So I have to remember, and we have to remember, that we have to remember that it's more important to show benevolence and to accept that others have had their feelings hurt, to have concessions, than it is to be right. And you know, I may joke about never apologizing, but the truth is, you should always be prepared to apologize. Because sometimes we say stuff that's just not fair. And in an unfair world, adding to that unfairness is certainly not going to help anybody. But it's necessary sometimes. But whenever you can get away with it, try to be the bigger person and apologize. Because oftentimes, we can regret apologizing too much. But what's worse is regretting that you didn't apologize enough. We have some opinions going on here in chat. It's true. I would have been very frustrated. I think I was very frustrated that she was not being fair to me, and we all find unfairness in our world. It's true. That she was getting away with being a hypocrite, I suppose is what I mean. I didn't want to let her get away with it, but, you know, something I had to reassure someone of recently, something that I think is very important, is we really never know if someone is getting away with something or not, right? Because we think about them being venerated for their actions. That would be them getting away. Maybe, but I think what matters more than their peer pressure, positive or negative, is what they think, right? And you can never really know exactly what someone else thinks. And if they have all the happiness and pleasure and joy from what they've done, I suppose that might be getting away with it, but what if they don't? What if they feel scorn? What if they feel legitimate guilt and remorse? Then no, they haven't gotten away with anything, because they've just hurt themselves in a way they can never undo. And that's certainly not getting away with anything. Though a box on a desk is hardly worth any trauma over it, I have to admit. It's true. I was too young to be able to properly mandate that I was on the correct side of the argument. It was once again an issue of me believing that she could read my mind. And it bothers me even to this day, where I believe others can have a sense of what I'm talking about beyond what I am actually saying. It's a curse, I tell you. It's a curse. Alright, on to our last topic. Pit. Interesting. Pit. So there's a place that I think everybody has inside of them. You know, it's that place where you're at your lowest low. You know, it's that place where you go when things are falling apart or are falling into a mess and disarray. And inside of us does exist, for each of us, a spot where we don't feel like we can get any lower, where we feel as if we've hit rock bottom. That pit inside of us that we throw ourselves to in times of deep crisis and grief and sort of a morose of self-doubts, self-hatreds, or even self-destructions. And that's a place I've been a few times, I have to admit. We each have this pit inside of us, and it's up to us to find our way out of it each time that we fall in. Sometimes we need help, and I've realized that over the years, I've needed a lot of help, honestly, because I've had a lot of trouble going through this tough world. But, you know, I've had many people by my side, many important, strong, intelligent, and maybe even sexy people, you know, little sexy, how cool they are. But I'll let them decide who they think is the sexiest. That's not up to me to decide. But I think that everybody can be intellectually stimulating to some degree, and I think that it is really important to remember that arousal and help and excitement, it comes from the mind at its base. Sure, you can have a physical reaction, but the mind is what triggers that. And it is the mind that helps us get through these situations. It is the mind, us. It comes from inside of us that these situations are resolved. And if we don't reach out, if we don't want to be helped, then nobody can help us, no matter how sexy they might be. I think that's a good place to end up our stream for tonight. Generally, these streams will be about an hour long, diving into various subjects that have happened in my life. How many times do I Twitch a week? It's once so far. Last Saturday on Halloween and today are my first two. But I could stream a little bit more if it was something people were interested in. I mean, I'd have to see the turnout first, but I plan to stream on Saturdays at 7:30. That's my plan right now. But if that's my plan, yes, that's my plan for the moment. That's what I'd like. like a hard Saturday and then like a soft every other day of the week where like it could happen, but I don't know, maybe it will. We are almost to 75 views, which is incredible. Enjoy listening to me talk before bed. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have had similar reactions to this, and oh, here's a good quote from Star Trek 7 of 9. Physiologically, it bears a striking similarity to disease. A series of biochemical responses that trigger an emotional cascade, impairing normal functioning. Well, I don't know about you, but those biochemicals are a hell of a ride. And once I find the right person to help me navigate those waters, I can only imagine the carnage and havoc and the mischief we'll get up to. But you have to forgive me for being so sentimental. I suppose I enjoy the idea of being in love quite a bit. But then again, who doesn't? Romanticized, I suppose, I feel. uh, Thank you so much for being here. We're ending here in about 2 minutes. Thank you for being here, Ella. Thank you for being here, Rami. And whoever that third person is, I don't know exactly who that is. Let me see. Whoever you are, a third person, thank you so much for being here. And if I am able to, I will think about doing tomorrow as another streaming day. I'm pretty close, Ella, to being back on Second Life, I have to admit. Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, if this month goes well and I don't need that surgery on my right arm, then I'll probably be back in Second Life by December. And I'm glad that you enjoyed listening. I really am. I'm enjoying myself, honestly. I'm enjoying myself. Which I always worry that I won't, but then I always do. Every time. And isn't that a contradiction right there? Isn't that a strange thing? It is good. You're right. It is good, but it's so strange that that's the way I have to do it every time before I actually get into it. Who knows why? The mind is a strange and upsetting thing, but it's gotten me here, so what can I say? Thank you guys for watching. Have a lovely Saturday. Bye-bye.